I added an energy gun to my indie game. Why is it shooting rocks? Well, because I made the shooting mechanic before I made the bullets. Don't make that mistake. With that said, let's move on with the development log. As you saw, I recently added an energy gun to my game Senseless, which is a story game where the player controls their senses. This portal gun stand-in will be the player's main method of interacting with the environment. For combat, it acts as a gun, obviously. And for puzzles, it will be used to add or remove power from different systems. With how integral this gun is to the game, it might shock you that just a matter of weeks ago, this gun wasn't even going to be added. Now that's not to say that I just came up with it. Like I said in my previous devlogs, I've made multiple attempts at making this game in the past, and the energy gun was a part of the very first attempt. However, back then, I couldn't figure out a way to make the electricity look good, so I ended up scrapping the mechanic to avoid the problem altogether. Obviously, I've gotten past that design barrier, and am free to fill my project with way too many electrifying effects. In those early days, the gun was going to have 3 modes: normal shooting, an energy beam, and finally a powerful blast that could be charged up. For this new iteration, I dropped the charge up blast, as it didn't really have a purpose. The normal shooting is already your base attack, and the energy beam acts as your high cost, high reward ability. I might bring back the charge up blast one day, but for now I'm going to move on to other parts of the game. Animation. As you can see, the gun is not completely static. That's because it's animated. Wow. However, making these animations has brought me more pain than you could ever know. While I am a terrible animator, that wasn't my main drawback. Normally when I animate something in Unity, I use the Unity animator, but for the player and enemies, I need something far more dynamic. So instead, I programmed the animations using the DoTween library. This will allow me to have more control over my animations and mix them together freely. Or at least I hope it will. Otherwise, I've wasted hours of my life trying to make this all work. Speaking of wasting time, I managed to completely break my saving and loading system. And by break, I mean realizing that it never worked in the first place. While everything worked fine in Unity, the standalone game didn't have the saved information. For example here, the background of the main menu is based on whatever section of the game the player is currently in. But when I built the game, there was no background because it had no idea which to load. As to not bore you with explanations of things I hardly understand, I'll just say, I fixed it. However, the saving and loading system is still a heavy work in progress, especially considering that I plan on letting the player have multiple save files. But back to the energy gun. Since the gun eventually runs out of energy, as seen by the bar on the top, I needed a way to recharge it. These points will act as charging stations to restore the gun's energy. On a cooldown, of course. We don't want the player to have too much fun. The last thing I added was a menu to switch between your senses, but I hope you never see this menu again, since I plan on improving it a great deal before my next devlog. Right now, needing to pause the game to manually click a new sense just interrupts the flow of gameplay too greatly. Although, let's be honest, there isn't much gameplay to interrupt right now. This is a good time to mention that all the visuals are temporary. I already plan on a new design for the energy gun that better displays its ammo. You may also notice that the game's color palette has changed. Now the buildings are much darker. This color palette is by no means final, so don't freak out if you think it's awful. Or do freak out. I can't control you. Or can I? On that note, like and subscribe. Goodbye.